Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I'm a drywall installer, which means I move around a lot for my job. Most of my work comes at the end of construction projects, so I often rent flats and houses for short periods, usually about 6 months at a time. This lifestyle has led me to deal with many landlords over the years, both good and bad. When it comes to bad landlords, I typically just move on to the next job, take the loss of my deposit, and never use them again if I'm working in that area in the future. But this one particular landlord got under my skin so badly that I couldn't just walk away. In 2021, I landed a big job in London working on the renovation of Wembley Stadium. I decided to look for a house to rent rather than a flat, knowing I'd be there for a while. I found a reasonably priced, for London house advertised by a private landlord in an online marketplace. I called him, and we met later that day. The landlord, who introduced himself as Mike, seemed okay at first. "The house is in great condition," he said as we toured the property. "I think you'll find it suitable for your stay." I nodded, thinking it looked decent enough. "Looks good to me. I'll take it." We shook hands, I paid him the deposit in cash, and moved in that weekend. I ended up staying in the house for nearly a year without any problems. I always paid the rent into his bank account on time and fixed any small issues myself without bothering him. Up until it was time to move out, I only spoke to him twice on the phone after there was an issue with the heating that I couldn't fix myself. He sent an engineer round the next day to fix the boiler. As the job was wrapping up, I went to the pawn shop that Mike owned to give him notice. "I'll be moving out next month," I told him. "Feel free to come round and inspect the house before I leave so I can get my deposit back when I return the keys." He never came round while I was in, so I assumed he had let himself in while I was at work, as I had told him I was fine with that if needed. On moving day, I went to his shop and handed over the keys. "Can I get my deposit back now?" I asked. Mike's expression changed. "What deposit?" "The month's rent I gave you in advance as a security deposit," I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach. He smirked. "I'm keeping that to cover the cost of repairing damages caused while you were living in the property." "What damages?" I shot back. "With the work and decorating I did, the house is in better shape now than when I moved in." Mike stepped forward, getting right in my face. "You're not getting it back, so duck off," he growled, giving me a shove that made me stumble back 3 steps to avoid falling. Now, I'm average in size and build, and Mike had a good 4 inches on me height-wise and obviously spent some time at the gym. The wise move would have been to back away and cut my losses. But before I became a builder, I was a member of the British Army, in a regiment called the Royal Green Jackets. They trained us that the best way to deal with aggression is to meet it swiftly and with much more violent aggression. Without thinking, I started to move forward, fully intending to drop this jerk quickly and painfully. After the first step, a thought popped into my head like a bolt from the blue. I stopped, took a moment to consider the idea from a few angles, then said, "Okay, bye," to my now ex-landlord and walked out of his shop. What Mike didn't know was that I had a spare back door key cut when I lived in the house. I had stashed it in my van in case I ever lost the keys. So later that evening, I let myself back in and decided to stay for one last night before leaving in the morning for my next job in Scotland. I spent that final night in the house carefully removing every bit of wood. I took down doors, removed skirting boards, banisters, architraves, and floorboards, being extremely careful not to damage anything. I also completely dismantled all the kitchen units, took up the wood flooring and carpets. Then I left everything in nice, neat piles in each room. The next morning, as I got in my van and prepared to start my drive, I decided I wanted to rub a little more salt into Mike's wounds. So I stopped at his shop on the way out of London, got a spare hammer, screwdriver, bag of nails, and box of wood screws out of the back of my van, and went into the shop. Mike wasn't there, probably for the best. So I left the tools with his confused-looking assistant, Sarah. "What's all this?" she asked, eyeing the tools skeptically. I grinned. "Tell your boss he'll be needing these," I said, then turned and left for my drive north. I had my phone switched off while driving. A few hours later, while having a bite to eat at a service station near Nottingham, I decided to switch it back on. I was greeted by a string of text messages and some very colorful voice messages, which left me chuckling to myself. As I listened to Mike's increasingly angry voicemails, I couldn't help but smile. "Enjoy putting your house back together, Mike," I muttered to myself, starting up my van for the rest of the journey to Scotland. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I never thought I'd be in a battle with my homeowner association, but here I am. It all started when I inherited my grandparents' old farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The place needed work, but I loved its charm and the 5 acres of land it sat on. About a year after I moved in, a new housing development sprung up next door. Suddenly I had neighbors, and an homeowner association to deal with. At first, they just sent me letters asking me to join. I politely declined each time. My property wasn't part of their development, so I didn't see the need. Things were fine for a while. I kept to myself, worked on fixing up the old house, and enjoyed my little slice of country living. Then one day I came home from a week-long work trip to find a crew setting up solar panels in my back field. I marched over, confused and angry. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. The crew foreman looked equally confused. "We're installing the new community solar project," he said. "Didn't the homeowner association tell you?" My blood started to boil. "I'm not part of the homeowner association," I said through gritted teeth. "This is my private property." The foreman's eyes went wide. He got on his phone right away to call the homeowner association president. I stood there fuming as I waited for answers. A few minutes later, Karen, the homeowner association president, came speeding up in her fancy SUV. She got out with a plastic smile plastered on her face. "Oh, hello there," she said in a sickeningly sweet voice. "I see you've noticed our wonderful new green energy initiative." "On my property," I said flatly. Her smile faltered for just a second. "Well, yes, we thought it would be the perfect spot. You have all this unused land, after all." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You can't just build things on someone else's property without permission." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. This benefits the whole community. Your property values will go up." "I don't care about property values," I snapped. "This is my land. You had no right to do this." "Well, the work is almost done now," Karen said, her voice taking on an edge. "It would be a shame to undo all this progress, wouldn't it?" I realized then that she had no intention of stopping or removing the panels. She thought she could just steamroll over me. "Get these panels and your crew off my property right now," I said, "or I'm calling the police." Karen's fake smile vanished completely. "Now listen here," she hissed. "This project is happening whether you like it or not. The homeowner association voted and approved it. If you try to interfere, we'll sue you for damages." I pulled out my phone and dialed cops right in front of her. Karen's face went red with anger as I reported the trespassing and unauthorized construction. The police arrived pretty quickly. I showed them the property lines and explained that I had never given permission for any of this. The officers made the crew pack up and leave. Karen was livid. She started ranting about how I was ruining things for everyone and threatened to make my life miserable. The officers warned her to calm down or she'd be arrested for disorderly conduct. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Karen and the homeowner association launched an all-out assault. They plastered flyers all over the neighborhood calling me an enemy of green energy. They filed noise complaints every time I mowed my lawn. Someone even slashed my tires one night. I tried reasoning with some of the other homeowner association members, but Karen had them convinced I was the bad guy. It was beyond frustrating. Finally, I'd had enough. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He was shocked when I told him what happened. "They built on your land without permission?" he said incredulously. "Oh, we're going to have fun with this one." We filed a lawsuit against the homeowner association for trespassing, property damage, and harassment. My lawyer also reported Karen to the police for filing false reports about the noise complaints. The homeowner association tried to claim they had an easement that allowed them to use my land, but they had no documentation to back that up. It was all lies Karen had made up. The case never even made it to trial. Once the homeowner association's lawyer saw our evidence, he advised them to settle immediately. They ended up paying me a huge sum for damages and legal fees. Karen was forced to step down as homeowner association president and was charged with filing false police reports. The icing on the cake? I used some of the settlement money to install my own solar panels, the right way, with proper permits. Every time I look at them, I smile thinking about how Karen's scheme backfired. I still get dirty looks from some of the homeowner association members when I'm out in the yard, but these days, they don't dare set foot on my property or cause any trouble. They learned the hard way that you can't just take what isn't yours, no matter how good your intentions are. The next one is a petty revenge story. This probably stretches the limits of petty and revenge, but I'm gonna post it anyway. I've never told a single person this story because it's so stupidly petty. Around 20 years ago when I was in college, my girlfriend then, she's now my wife, and I had plans to go to a nice dinner in our parents' hometown. I had another commitment during the day that was going to leave me sweaty and dirty. I don't remember what it was, but I remember really needing a shower before going to dinner. So the plan was that I would finish up during the day, meet her at her parents' house where I would quickly shower, and then we'd leave for dinner. After I got done, I went to their house. My GF and her parents were asking me about how things went. All I remember is feeling so insanely dirty that I didn't want to stand there talking to them because I was sure that they could smell me from several feet away. I continued to inch my way up the stairs where I knew I would be showering. When I felt like I could safely leave the conversation without being rude, I asked my GF, "You have soap/shampoo/etc. up there that I can use to shower?" She said, "Yup." This is when her dad, my now fiel, literally jumped up out of his seat saying, "No, no, no, let me find you some men's soap. You don't want to use her soap." I quickly tried to stop him as I really didn't care. I just wanted to shower. He insisted. So I stood there halfway up the stairs for a few minutes, desperately wanting to go up and shower while he rooted around in his bathroom trying to find some manly soap. He eventually found something, handed it over, and I went upstairs. Being annoyed at one, his overall insistence that I couldn't possibly use soap that wasn't intended for men, and two, having to wait longer to take the shower, I decided I was going to be petty and use my girlfriend's soap anyway. Take that. But the actual petty revenge continues to this day. Her parents still live in that same house, and we still live in a different city, so every time we go back to visit, we stay at their house. We still use that same bathroom when we go back, and that bathroom is always stocked with both manly and girly body washes. Guess who uses the girly body wash every time I'm there? Even though I prefer the scents of the manly stuff. Even though not a single soul knows about how I was wronged or the revenge that I've been exacting for 20 years now. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Background. Buddy worked for a company that got on the hybrid WFH train early. He got his job around 2012. These events take place around 2016. We live in NJ, and his office was in NYC. His contract said that he had to be in 1 day a week, same day each week, and up to 5 days a month, so 1 additional day on top of his weekly day. If work brought him in more than that, he got paid his hourly billable rate for his commute and any extra hours. His commute was 1.5, 2 hours each way, so that could quickly add up to hundreds or thousands of hours. Other than a couple of full-time and office folks, his co-workers had similar contracts and had to be in 8 times a month, and some lived as far away as Boston or DC. They worked in a well-paid niche consulting field, so I guess this was worth it to everyone. On to the story. Buddy's company has a client who is very old school, and their point of contact is a jerk. On a video call, the client notices that some staff do not appear to be in the office, before blur was as common, and demands that all of the work done for their contract be done in an office, rants about professionalism. Buddy's manager simply says, "Okay." Manager calls a meeting afterwards with Buddy's team. He knows they're upset, but asks them to prepare to come into the office daily for the next 4 or 6 weeks. Tells them to keep very careful track of receipts, costs, time, etc., and asks them to trust him. For the people who live further away, tells them he'll help set up accommodations for them and their families if necessary. Because the company treats people well, everyone goes along with it with minor grumbling. About 5 weeks go by, everyone is coming in daily. Remember when I said that most people didn't come in? So yeah, not much space in the office. The company liked teleworking because it allowed them to have an NYC headquarters, but not much space. Everyone keeps careful track of commuting costs, etc. time, and is getting reimbursed for their travel time and everything they are owed. This includes some folks who had contracts that covered lodging if they had to come in more than a day or two in a row. Then one day, the manager tells them they can go back to their regular schedule. Everyone notices jerk client is gone, but that the client company is still their client. Later on, Buddy finds out what happened. As per the terms of the contract, the client had to pay for all of that overage. Frustrating for the employees, but Buddy said no one was too mad knowing that it was temporary. Buddy's manager also knew that the same jerk point of contact had been a jerk. He had apparently gotten tired of being asked to sign contract modifications. Buddy said usually these were set at modifications over 1K or something, but this guy had thought these sign-offs were below him, and so set that threshold much higher, something like 100K. Due to the wording of the contract, this was 100K per change, not total. So in the 5 weeks that everyone was coming in full-time, he had managed to cost his company a few $100,000, but since each individual employee was a single change, no one noticed until the next billing cycle. Jerk got called out by his own company and they tried to contest the payment. Turns out the contract was very clearly written and the client had to pay. On top of that, this is a pretty niche field, and so the client didn't really have many other options if they wanted to change consultants at that point. Jerk point of contact got fired, and according to Buddy's manager, couldn't really find work in their smallish field. Buddy and his co-workers got a nice chunk of money. The next one is an entitled people's story. Where have you been? We promised our children they could walk your dogs. We want the Dalmatian, Labrador, and Husky. This was how I was met by a family of 4. Mom, Dad, and 2 daughters I would guess were about 9 and 7. Inside the kennels for more than 80 dogs looking to be rehomed. What was more surprising was that it was 7 a.m. and Easter morning. I was one of 2 people on site as we had a skeleton team covering the overnight with more colleagues to join us for the big walk in the morning. OP, what the hell are you doing in here? Get out! Entitled father, don't scream at us. We are here to take your dogs out. Don't you dare disappoint my daughters. OP, I need you to get out. I'm calling the police. Entitled father, don't be ridiculous. Quickly, young person, come and open the gates so we can our Easter walk. We do this every year. This can't have been true. Mostly as we only did walks once someone had been through a full application process. Also, as many of these dogs get to us because they have been rescued by the emergency side of the charity I worked for, so many were a long way away from being ready to be reintroduced into the home. Dogs start barking and snarling at the heated exchange. Entitled daughter, why are they barking and snarling? Daddy, make them stop. Entitled father, will you get your dogs under control? This is a home counties. We do not expect this kind of treatment. Slowly but surely backing away, OP. Out now. You're not allowed in here. Entitled father, will you come here? You're upsetting my daughters and this is a special holiday. All you have to do is get them leashed up and we will be back in an hour or 2. OP, you have to leave slips out of the door and starts running to reception. Flying back to the office, I burst through the door like the Kool-Aid man. Explained to my colleague what had happened, who got on to the police immediately. I ran to the cameras to see how the hell we hadn't spotted them. The cameras hadn't picked them up. Side note, this was the mid-2000s when digital cameras were not cheap, so we only had so many on site. We stayed in the office until the police arrived about 20 minutes later. I was getting fidgety as the dogs hadn't been fed yet. Surely they were long gone and I could just get on with feeding them. My more experienced colleague put the kibosh on that. Finally, the police arrived and after introductions and a quick explanation, we headed towards the kennel. Opens the door to the kennels. OP, is it okay if I start feeding the dogs? We've had to delay. Policeman, no, we need to make sure the site is secure first. Policewoman, I will get you as soon as we have the clear. OP, no prob. Entitled father, where the hell have you been? You've left us here ages. What kind of service do you call this? Policeman, sir, you're trespassing. Entitled father, what are you talking about? We are helping. Policeman, you must leave. Entitled father, no, I will not disappoint my daughters. From my vantage point, what happened next was a bit of a muddle. As both police officers approached the family, the father moved towards the policeman. The policeman had the entitled man on the floor as quick as a flash, and then the cacophony of noise became epic as both daughters screamed. The wife started hollering obscenities at the female officer, and the dogs barked and howled in unison. It was the dogpocalypse. Time seemed to stand still as the policewoman stared at the mother and daughters. Entitled woman, get off him! We just want to walk the dogs. Policewoman, ma'am, you're trespassing. You have to leave now. Entitled woman, no, you should arrest them. Point in my direction, for lack of service. Policewoman, ma'am, please take your daughters to the exit or I will have to put you under arrest. Entitled woman, don't be stupid. I know random person who I have never heard of and I'm a policy person helping the kennels at this time so they can't have been that high up. They will have your badge for this. Policewoman, you're under arrest takes woman under her control. Entitled daughter, are we under arrest now? Dogs. Making all the noise of an upcoming superstorm arriving. At some point during this, the police had called in backup who arrived en masse. I was politely but deliberately removed from the situation. Both entitled mother and father were arrested, and I had to give multiple statements to the police. It turned out that they were very local and had walked in by hopping a fence and entering through a side door. It would appear this had been left unlocked and they'd just wandered in. Both parents were fined, given an order to stay away from the site, and were rather embarrassed in the local press. On Nice Element is one of the daughters, not sure which one as I had left by then, became a volunteer when they were older, so at least it didn't kill their passion for dogs. The next story is titled, Quit Swimming So Stupid, My Grandson is Copying You. It all starts with the most infernal of devices at the gym. The treadmill. See, a friend of mine who is basically a professional gym rat told me, dude, bro, guy, you gotta up your cardio game. And insists that a half hour on a treadmill every time I hit the gym would be a good plan. Life pro tip. When someone addresses you as dude, bro, guy, seek a second opinion. Did the treadmill thing for a few weeks, and then I noticed anytime I went downhill, my knee was like, hey, you're an a-hole. Stop that. Which was a problem. As I have a dog who likes to go on walks and where I live is not precisely known for its flat terrain, this was an issue. Then it got worse. Now it was downhills and stairs. Deadlifts? Squats? Leg press? No problem. Slight downhill? Stairs? Oh no. Figuring knees aren't something one should ignore and hope it goes away with, I met with my doctor. She promptly referred me to physical therapy and not a knee brace like I was hoping. I met with the PT lady. She did an exam, said my quads are wonk and need work. I also discovered where my quads are. I was told to do not a lot with my legs at the gym other than bikes or swimming. All things being equal, I'll swim. I can swim, but I cannot swim well for very long. Turns out being out of breath and trying to get actual air in isn't as easy as it used to be, especially when some fat ass is splashing water all around. Until my lungs catch up with the rest of me, I've adopted what I call the fatty twirl. 4 or 5 strokes of freestyle, roll onto my back, and then kick with the legs until I've got air in me. Then roll back for more and pray I haven't gotten close enough to the edge of the pool to smack my hand into it. I assume I'm doing well because PT lady hasn't given me that I am disappoint look typically reserved for dentists when one has forgotten to floss. But that brings us to yesterday. Normally, I go in the morning, mostly in the interests of avoiding shrieking children while I'm trying to do my thing. But work was nutty, and I went later than I usually do. There were clumps of teenagers doing I don't even know what, but they mostly just snickered to each other, and I minded my business. Now, the dry part of my routine is done, and it's pool time. I wound up taking a lap lane next to a grandmother in her 50s who was apparently trying to teach her grandkid, who was 10 tops, how to swim properly. I didn't hear a whole lot, seeing as when my ears weren't underwater, there was a fat guy splashing and making a bunch of noise, but I could tell the kid was splashing and coughing a lot, and this made Grandma upset. I didn't pay attention because it wasn't my business and there were lifeguards. I just wanted to get my laps done. Was on an extended period of back float time trying to catch my breath when I was ambushed by a pool noodle. Said noodle was applied directly to my face and not gently. While not painful, a noodle to the noggin is quite startling. I believe the first words out of my mouth were, "What the hell?" It was Grandma wielding the noodle, and she was giving me a very stern look. "Watch your language and stop doing that." I asked Grandma what it was I was doing that led her to believe smacking me with a noodle was a good idea. Grandma informed me that I was swimming stupid and her grandson wanted to copy me, so I needed to stop. After I confirmed that was in fact why I was assaulted with a noodle, I suggested that she might have better luck in the kids' part of the pool. You know, the one over there, far away from me. She said she was just fine here. I was the one causing the problem. I thanked her for her opinion and promptly resumed my swim. On my return trip, this woman stepped into my lane and grabbed my ankle. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I'm swimming and something grabs my leg, instant panic response. I immediately started flailing and kicking wildly, trying to free myself. Grandma got herself a nice adrenaline kick right on her forearm. I came up gasping for air and ready to start swinging. I'm stopped by the soothing sounds of Grandma wailing about how I just broke her arm. Edit. Her arm was not, in fact, broken. She wound up with a nasty bruise, and that was it. I caught her with the top of my foot. Pro tip. Top of the foot is a bad place to land a kick with. Naturally, that's enough to get the lifeguards involved, none of whom were apparently paying attention before she started screaming. 2 of them are lifting Grandma out of the pool and trying to examine her arm while she's still wailing and flailing. A third is giving me static about kicking another guest in the pool. Well, they started to until I pointed out where the kicking happened and her grandson was. Poor kid had frozen in place with an expression of abject horror. Once she connects the dots, she realizes I'm not the problem. I tell her I'm going to go get changed and then I'll identify myself to the front desk because if I'm going to get interrogated, I'd prefer to be clothed. I did my thing, and by the time I'd showered and changed, there was a manager at the desk apologizing for what had gone on. They reviewed the tapes, and that woman's membership had been terminated, and they're very sorry, please don't sue us. Best. Interrogation. Ever. The next story is titled, Neighbor Threatens Farmer and Calls Police for Alleged Trespassing on His Own Land, but Faces Epic Revenge from Farmer Who Won't Be Messed With. My family has owned a farm for generations, and I've been running it for years. It's hard work, but it's also incredibly fulfilling, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. The farm is situated in a rural area, and there are several neighboring homes on one side. Most of the people in these homes appreciate the peace and quiet of the countryside, and we all get along well. However, one neighbor in particular made it his mission to make my life miserable. A couple of years ago, an elderly woman who had lived in one of the neighboring houses passed away, and her son, Andrew, inherited the property. I assumed he would sell it and move on, but he moved in instead. I tried to welcome him by taking over a basket of fresh produce and some milk from our dairy cows, but he barely acknowledged me, and I felt like I was wasting my time. He asked me if I always started the tractor early in the morning, and I told him I had to keep to my schedule to keep the farm running smoothly. He wasn't happy about it, but I didn't think too much of it. Over time, I noticed that Andrew seemed to have a problem with me. He complained about the noise from the farm animals, which he said kept him up at night, and he accused me of trespassing on his land, even though I never did. I always made sure that I kept my side of the fence clean and well kept, but he seemed to have it in for me. One day, while I was doing some routine yard work, he approached me and told me that I had to get off his property. I was taken aback by his aggressive tone, and I tried to explain that I was on my land, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he threatened to call the police and have me arrested for trespassing. I was confused and didn't know what to do. I had always tried to be a good neighbor, but this guy seemed to have a grudge against me for no reason. A few days later, I went on a short vacation, and I had someone take care of the animals and the crops while I was gone. When I came back, I noticed that the fence between our properties had been moved, and I was now supposedly trespassing on his land. When I confronted Andrew about it, he became aggressive and pulled out a machete, threatening to kill me. I was terrified, and I knew I had to do something. I called the police, and when they arrived, Andrew tried to make it seem like I was the aggressor, but the police quickly saw through his lies and realized that he was the one causing trouble. They arrested him, and he was charged with several crimes, including assault with a deadly weapon and drug possession. It turned out that he had been dealing drugs out of his house and was using me as a scapegoat to keep the authorities off his back. After Andrew was taken away, I felt relieved, but also angry. I had done nothing to deserve his hostility, and he had put me and my family in danger. I decided to take action to ensure that he wouldn't be a problem in the future. I talked to a lawyer and made sure that the fence between our properties was legally established, and I also filed a restraining order against him. A few months later, I received a notice from the county sheriff's office that Andrew had been released from jail and was living in a halfway house. I was worried that he would try to cause more trouble, but I tried not to think too much about it. I continued to run my farm as usual, and everything seemed to be going well. That is, until one day when I noticed that some of my animals were missing. At first, I thought they had just wandered off somewhere, but when I searched the property, I found signs that someone had broken into the barn and stolen them. I immediately thought of Andrew. He was the only person who would have any reason to steal my animals, and I knew he was capable of it. I called the police and they launched an investigation. They searched Andrew's new place of residence and found some of my animals on his property. They also discovered evidence that he had been planning to do something even worse. It turns out that Andrew had been plotting to burn down my barn and destroy my crops. He had been working with some other criminals, and they had even made a plan to harm me and my family. If it hadn't been for my animals going missing, I might never have known what they were up to. The police arrested Andrew and his accomplices, and they were charged with a long list of crimes. Andrew was sentenced to several years in prison, and his property was seized by the government. I was relieved that justice had been served, but I was also shaken up by how close I had come to being seriously hurt. After the incident, I decided to take some additional measures to ensure my safety and the safety of my family. I installed a security system around my property, and I made sure that all of my neighbors knew what had happened. I also made a point of keeping in touch with the police, just in case anything else happened. As time went by, I started to feel more at ease. I continued to run my farm, and it became more successful than ever. I even began to expand my business, and I started to sell some of my products at a local farmer's market. I had never felt prouder of what I was doing, and I knew that I had overcome a huge challenge. Update, it's been a few years since the incident, and things have been going well. Andrew is still in prison, and I haven't heard anything from him since he was arrested. My farm is thriving, and I've even hired some additional help to keep up with the demand for my products. I'm also more involved in the community, and I've started to give talks at local schools about the importance of agriculture and the challenges that farmers face. I've also become an advocate for rural safety, and I've worked with local law enforcement to develop programs to help farmers and other rural residents stay safe. I'm proud to say that my efforts have made a difference, and I've received several awards for my work. Looking back, I realized that the incident with Andrew was a turning point in my life. It made me stronger, and it showed me that I was capable of overcoming any challenge that came my way. I'm grateful for the support of my family, my neighbors, and the police, and I'm proud of the work that I do every day. I know that I'll never forget what happened, but I'm also confident that I'm prepared for whatever comes next. The next story is titled, Man Refuses to Let Me Enter the Elevator, Ends Up Spending More Time Than Necessary in the Elevator. So, I'm a black man living in Eastern Europe. Cue one fateful afternoon when I wanted to go down and collect something from a friend who was passing by. I press the elevator and wait for it to arrive. Elevator door opens and there's a couple inside, but as I try to enter, the man blocks the passage, telling me to wait for the elevator to return. Mind you, I'm on the 7th floor and my friend was already waiting for me to come down. Also, the elevator has a fixed time before its doors close, about 20 seconds. So you'll have to wait for the doors to close after you enter. Back to my story. I tell this man and his wife that I'm actually in a hurry and I had to go down now. And he literally stands in front of the elevator entrance shouting, "No!" His wife tells him to let me in since there was still space, but he refused. I said, "Alright," and decided to use the stairs. Cue my petty revenge. I ran down the stairs, didn't mind the cardio really, and pressed all the elevator buttons on all the lower floors. Got to my friend and collected my package, then ran back upstairs. On my way back up, I could hear the man cussing out inside the elevator and his wife's laughter. They hadn't even reached the ground floor yet. I felt so proud of myself. TLDR, man refuses to let me enter the elevator when I was in a hurry, and I ran down and pressed all the elevator buttons. Edit. This definitely blew up. I love the elevator puns, guys. Keep 'em coming. Lol. Some of y'all are much more evil than I am. Someone said I should have gone down to the next floor and keep on pressing the elevator button until he lets me in. One even said I should have gone to turn off the elevator. I don't actually know how to do that, and I don't think I would have if I knew where the switch was. Also, it would have been much more satisfying if the elevator stopped working on its own accord. COVID or racism? I don't know, and I actually don't care. I was wearing a mask, but he wasn't. The last story is titled, Crazy Karen at a Starbucks. This just happened at the Starbucks I'm still sitting at. I'm a regular customer at a Starbucks in my town, and for reference, I was just sitting at a table watching this happen. So, a woman walks up to the counter with her drink, dragon fruit iced tea with lemonade in it, and calls over the barista. Woman. Hi, sir, could you please remake this drink? Barista. Yeah, sure, what was the problem with it? Woman. It made me feel sick. There's something wrong with your lemonade. Remake it right now. Barista. Okay, no problem, man. So, he goes to remake the drink and rinses the cup, cap, and straw with water. He hands her back the cap and straw, and she goes, "Oh, it's okay, you can just use another cup and stuff. You have it, don't you?" So this guy uses another cup to make the drink. She takes it back, and then starts getting mad. Woman. Did you use the same lemonade from the pitcher? Barista. Yes, man, that's the lemonade we use for everyone. Woman. Can you just get the concentrate and put it in my drink? Barista. For sure. So he makes the drink for a third time with a third cup, per request of the woman, and hands it back to her. She finally seems happy and walks back to her table. You'd think that's it, but oh no, this woman just doesn't seem to ever be happy. She comes up to the counter and calls the barista over. I kid you not, these are her exact words. Woman. Can you have someone else make this for me? You must be new here and making it wrong. I am a regular, so I feel like I should be treated better than this. Barista. Actually, I've been here for a little over a year and I've never seen you before. If you need me to, I can make this drink for you again. The woman throws the cup at the barista, cussed him out, and leaves the store in a rage. At this point, I feel so bad for the barista that I go over and help him clean up the mess she made. So that was the crazy Starbucks experience I just had. The next story is titled,
EM thinks I owe her 10,000 pounds compensation because her son grew up to be a thug, just like I said he would. Years ago, my cousin Lucy and I had a strained relationship because she let her son, Damien, do anything he wanted, never punished him, and brushed away anything he did as boys will be boys, or he's just a kid. It came to a breaking point between us when Lucy and Damien were visiting years ago. Damien was 12 at the time, and my daughter Maggie was 9. Maggie was sitting happily playing her Xbox in her bedroom upstairs. While Lucy and I were talking, Damien got bored and wandered off. A few minutes later, I heard screaming and crying. I rush up to Maggie's room to find her on the floor, blood all over her face, while Damien is just casually playing Xbox. It turns out he came up and demanded a turn on Xbox. Maggie said sure, Just let me finish the level. So he snatched the controller from her hand and smashed her around the face with it, then shoved her out of the way. I rushed her to the hospital. Luckily, it looked worse than it was, and there was no lasting damage, and I live in the UK, so no medical bills, but I was furious. I told Lucy what Damien did, and she shrugged and said, "You know how boys are with their video games. She should have just let him play." I told her in no uncertain terms that she and her son were not allowed anywhere near me or my family. We got into a huge fight over this, where she, of course, tried to absolve her little angel of anything. So I lost it and told her if she didn't discipline him and teach him boundaries, she would end up raising a monster who would grow up to be a thug or worse, which infuriated her. This caused a fallout within the family for years, largely because Lucy lied and told everyone her son and Maggie had just been play fighting, and that's how she got hurt. It was just an accident, and I was overreacting. After a few years, everyone forgot. I still forbade Lucy or her hellspawn from coming anywhere near me. Several other family members did the same. I can't imagine why. Fast forward to a little before the pandemic. Damien was 19. Just like I predicted, he soon learned that thanks to his mother, he was bulletproof, as she would never believe he did anything wrong. So his behavior got worse and worse to the point where he was kicked out of every school in the area and had to go to a special school. I got a call from Frank, Lucy's brother, telling me that Lucy had been rushed to the hospital, that he knows we don't talk, but Lucy was seriously hurt, and he wanted to let me know. Despite our history, I went to visit Lucy, accompanied by Frank and his wife. Before this, we had been really close, and I was upset to hear she was hurt. When I got there, I was shocked by what I saw. She was really banged up, her face swollen, bruises all up her arms. It turned out Damien had done this. She was really struggling for money, and he refused to get a job. So she tried to lay down the law and tell him to get a job, or she was throwing him out. So he attacked her, almost dislocated her jaw. It was horrific. Now, we had a history, but at this point, none of that mattered. I was worried and sad for her. I immediately asked if she needed help with anything. She seemed surprised, but we ended up all having a real heartwarming chat with her saying how much it meant to her that I came to see her. I thought maybe we were turning a corner and could repair our relationship. We had been really close as kids. Oh, how wrong I was. A few weeks later, I started getting blasted on social media and getting nasty messages and texts telling me what an awful person I was. And how could I do what I did to Lucy? I was confused. I hadn't done anything. I called Frank. He had no idea either, but he said he would look into it. Turns out Lucy had told everyone I had come to the hospital and mocked her, gloating, "I told you so," while she bawled her eyes out. I confronted Lucy about it, asking her how she could lie like that. She hit back that this was all my fault. It's what I deserved. If I knew this was going to happen, why didn't I do more to help her? She then demanded I pay her at least £10,000 for damages I caused. Like, what the fuck? She lied to everyone because she couldn't stand that I had been right and decided to punish me for it. For months, I endured hateful messages from family members who believed her lies. Not all my family believed her, of course, and Frank and his wife cleared things up about what really happened. He managed to record Lucy admitting that she lied, which got most people off my back. But there were still a few relatives who had it in their heads that there's no smoke without fire, and I must have done something to make her say what she did. But they're all distant relatives on her side, so who cares? Then the pandemic rolled around. Everyone forgot the petty squabbles Lucy and her lies caused. But last month we held a family gathering at my parents', the first in years due to the pandemic. Lucy showed up. Thankfully, Damien was absent on account of serving a prison sentence for aggravated assault and battery, unrelated to what he did to his mother. I went to ask Lucy how she was doing. The first words out of her mouth were, "You need to pay me what you owe me. If you don't, I'm taking you to court. I need that money. It's the least you can do for ruining my life. She followed me around the party demanding that I pay her, telling everyone who would listen that I had ruined her life. My, what a happy family reunion. The next story is titled, Steal Grandma's Land, Build an Illegal House, and Trespass on Our Property? We'll destroy you. Growing up in my family was a roller coaster of emotions. There was always a lot of drama, especially between my aunt and my children, and the rest of us. My aunt was the kind of person who thought she could do whatever she wanted without any consequences. She was selfish and lacked empathy, which is why it didn't come as a surprise when she stole money from my grandmother and lied about it. This eventually led to my mother and grandmother disowning her and her children. On the other hand, my grandmother was the complete opposite of my aunt. She was the sweetest and most loving person you could ever meet. Her kindness was unmatched, and she was always there to put her foot down when needed. She owned a large piece of land that I was responsible for maintaining, and I was named in her will along with my mother. But things started to change when my aunt wanted to make amends and get back into the family. She started taking care of my grandmother, who had grown weaker and needed help, and soon became a constant presence in her life. Despite her efforts to act like she had changed, I had a feeling that something was off. My instincts were right, and I discovered that she was putting small doses of a harmful chemical in my grandmother's food to make her feel sick, so she could appear as the one who was helping her. I knew I had to act fast, so I confronted my aunt about what she was doing and warned her that I would call the police if she continued. She stopped making my grandmother sick, but I soon realized that she was up to something else. I found out that she had built an illegal house on the edge of my grandmother's property and was spreading lies about my mother and me, hoping to get us out of the will. I was determined to get back at my aunt, so I came up with a plan. I had permission to take care of my grandmother's land, so I told my aunt to get rid of the illegal house. When she refused, I called the police, and they came out to the property and shut down the illegal house. My aunt was furious and tried to blame me, but the evidence was clear. I had outsmarted her and got the revenge I wanted. From that day on, I made sure to keep a closer eye on my aunt and cousins, and I was never going to let them get the better of me again. I want to protect what was rightfully mine and ensure that my grandmother was free from their grasp. I also made sure to keep a closer eye on my grandmother and take care of her, knowing that she was the most important person in my life. She was the reason I had become the person I am today, and I was grateful for her love and support. However, my aunt's determination to get back at me grew stronger. She started spreading false rumors and lying to anyone who would listen, trying to tarnish my reputation. I was determined not to let her win, so I dug up all the evidence I could find of her illegal activities and presented it to the authorities. With the help of the police, I was able to bring her to justice and put an end to her reign of terror once and for all. In the end, I emerged victorious, having successfully defended my family's honor and protected what was rightfully ours. My grandmother was proud of me, and I was proud of myself for standing up for what was right. It was a long and difficult journey, but I wouldn't have changed a thing, because sometimes the greatest reward comes from getting revenge. The next story is titled, Crazy Karen at Starbucks Gets Kicked Out. So, this isn't my first post here, and I'm sure it won't be my last. I'm deaf and have been since I was 12. From then on, I learned sign language and really focused on learning how to lip read because all of my friends were hearing. Our story begins a couple of days ago when me and a good friend of mine, known each other for over 10 years, were in line at Starbucks. Honestly, I was pretty nervous as most of the time I just use mobile order because it's a lot less pressure on me and less time consuming for the barista. But of course, today my phone had died. Luckily, I had a friend with me to calm me down. There was a pretty long line, but we didn't mind and we just signed while we waited our turn. when I see the lady in front of us at the counter. I can tell she's angry as she's throwing her hands up in the air, but of course she's facing away from me so I don't get to know all the juice. I asked my friend to sign what she was saying so I could gossip with her. So she starts interpreting, and here's what went down. EP, you are honestly the worst cashier I have ever met. Where is your manager? Today's your last day at work, and I'm going to make sure of it. Barista, I'll be right back. Just let me go get my manager for you. In the meantime, just step right over here so these two ladies can get through. The barista turns around and leaves when the EP looks back at me and my friend. EP, of course. Starbucks is always putting something I didn't understand, yet I'm always put last. Me, I'm sorry, I can't hear you, I'm deaf. I said this while signing EP. So they're going to serve a retard over me. I've been waiting longer and they should really serve the normal people first, she said. Something after that, but I was so shocked that I stopped reading her lips. Friend, are you kidding me? She's just deaf and she deserves just as much respect as you. Don't start calling her abnormal just because she can't ducking hear, you cunt. The manager came in from the back to calm everyone down. EP apparently told the manager I was throwing up gang signs when my friend told him, she's ducking deaf. What do you want from her, lady? And then EP went off on the cashier for attempting to have other people cut her in line. EP was asked to leave, and my friend and I got our drinks for free. And man, did it feel good to wave at that idiot while she was huffing in her car with my free coffee. The next story is titled, Ruin My Crap Boss's Marriage. About 10 years ago, when I was 19, I worked for a regional grocery store in the meatpacking department. Pay was bad, and I had a second shift. I came in at 3 and left at 11. It wasn't a terrible job, all things considered. I had the meat room to myself so I could listen to music and really just not be annoyed by other employees. My duties when I showed up was to package more ground beef and other beef-based products and put them on the shelf. After 5, I also had to juggle working behind the deli counter. Well, shortly after getting hired, the boss of the meat department showed back up from vacation, and I was the new guy. Everything was fine at the beginning, but I found when I would clock in, the lady behind the counter, we'll call her V, wouldn't be there, and there would be a line. So I would clock in, spend the first 30 minutes of my shift doing her job. No problem. I actually liked that position. Well, after the line was done, I would almost always see Mr. Boss staring me down angry. I'm not doing my job. He would give me the rant about doing my duties unless customers needed my help, and they almost always did, but he wouldn't listen. Come to find out, the reason V isn't behind the counter is because her and Mr. Boss are having meetings in his office with the door closed. Not my husband or wife, not my problem. We continue in this dance of me covering her station and getting in trouble for it for a few weeks until an ice storm hits. I tell my boss I can't drive my car out and I'm waiting on a ride, so I might be a little late. He proceeded to fire me because this is the last straw. By the way, I hadn't had any write-ups. I agree it's fine because I hate this job anyway. Fast forward 2 years. I'm 21. And I'm celebrating with my friends at basically the only local bar in this terrible, tiny, crap-hole town. And when we walk in, who do we see? Why, if it isn't Mr. Boss, and not V, but his wife. He looks at me and tries to act like it's a happy coincidence. I sit down, tell him it's my 21st. He buys me a beer as a gift, and I chat him up. Enter my revenge. I introduce myself to his wife and tell her how he treated me, talking about how I would cover the deli counter almost every shift for half an hour and then get in trouble for it because it wasn't my job. No matter how many times I tried telling Mr. Boss I wouldn't have to cover deli if he and V weren't having their daily locked-door meetings in his office. She looked at him and looked at me and couldn't say a word. It could be read as crappy. But then his wife was super polite and friendly, and not in that crappy Southern religious style, but a genuinely nice person. I'm glad I could help pull the wool to let her know her husband is a complete garbage person. The last story is titled, I Hate People. So, some backstory. I work at a low-volume, high-price restaurant. Since we don't make a lot, we end up selling out some of our stuff occasionally. On this day, we happen to sell out one of our meats. Of course, customers come in right as we start to close. This is what happens. Customer, can I get one of your meat sandwiches? Me, I'm sorry, we actually sold out of that today. Customer, you're joking. What time do you close? Me, in about 5 minutes. Customer, well, I expect service until the second you close your restaurant. Me, I understand that, but we sold out an hour ago, and I'm cleaning my oven. I point over to the oven that's clearly being cleaned with soap all over inside. Customer, well, hurry and clean it. I want your meat sandwich. Me, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to make it. We are about to close. Customer, what the hell? How can you possibly expect me to pay $20 for your sandwich if you're out of it? I'm silent. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I am supposed to say that. Customer, exactly. So please make me a sandwich. I looked down at the clock and realized that we were supposed to be closed now. Me, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're closed. She gasps and says, ooh, really? You're going to love the Yelp review I leave for you. And to think I was going to leave you one huge tip. But here's a better one for you. She then flips me off and leaves. Ducking Karen, thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you would like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.